My next guest could be called a walking disaster. He is a disaster psychologist, and he was a survivor of Hurricane Katrina, one of the deadliest and most destructive hurricanes in U.S. history. And not only that, Jamie also battled cancer. Jamie ATEN is his name, and he says he's learned a lot of things about faith and resilience through those experiences. Jamie, welcome to 100 Huntley Street.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's go back to 2005. Katrina, horrible, horrible hurricane, did incredible damage. We saw the images from New Orleans. And you had just moved to Mississippi, which also got hit.
Yeah, so we had just moved in just 6 days before Katrina hit. And you talked about the damage in New Orleans and Mississippi. One of the things that was different was New Orleans was largely the flooding damage, whereas in Mississippi it was largely the wind damage. So it looked like a bomb had gone off in our neighborhood.
So you show up there, you're in church, you're with your wife, and you're starting your family, and they announce that this is coming. What were you thinking? Were you feeling helpless at the time?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to think because we had just moved in, so we lived out in the country. We didn't have cable yet. The cable person's supposed to come on Monday. Our cell phones didn't have a signal, so when I left work on Friday, we had no idea that the storm had changed, that we thought it was going to hit on the other side of Louisiana. Then over that weekend, it shifted and was coming right up between the states and headed for our community. And then our pastor gets up and he says that if you remember Camille, you know what I'm about to say. And I just had no idea what to do.
So 1,800 people, more than that, died in the hurricane, flooding, damage, $125 billion in damage. And how did you guys fare out of it?
We were very fortunate. So we had roof damage and trees down and debris everywhere. But I remember coming back into our neighborhood after the storm and just seeing some of our neighbors who had lost absolutely everything. That you saw pine trees that had gone through homes that looked like missiles and other homes that were just slabs of concrete. So we were very fortunate.
Were you feeling any guilt at that time? Because I'm going to talk more about your cancer story and some of that, but because you guys didn't, get hit as hard as others, were you feeling like, wow, I feel bad for those other people?
Yeah, definitely. There was both this sense of relief and gratitude, but also this kind of guilt of not knowing what to do with it, that, why were we so much better off than why others lost everything?
So you study disasters and how people respond to disasters. You have had a couple incidences now where there's the hurricane and then cancer. And I'm going to talk about that more specifically, but what was the draw to go into these disaster zones and try to find some things about it?
Well, having just moved in, I never set out to study disasters. That I actually went to South Mississippi because I wanted to study rural mental health disparities. And then this event happens right there in my backyard. And I saw the important role that churches played and Christians played in responding to disasters, and also how our faith can help us live more resiliently. So as a psychologist, I began studying that and then started doing research and helping and training churches all throughout the U.S. and then even internationally.
Okay, your family's growing, things are going well, you're in your career, and you're not feeling well, and you go to the doctor, and he talks about the C word. Tell me what was happening.
Well, actually, even before I heard about cancer, about a year prior, I was having kind of some symptoms. My stomach was hurting, and so I went to the doctor. He sent me to a specialist, and he said, well, you just need more fiber in your diet. So if these symptoms come back and see me. Well, it ends up being almost a whole year before the symptoms come back. And so at this point, I start having these shooting pains in my legs and my back, and I can't understand why, and I'm having a lot of discomfort in my stomach. And so I go to the doctor, he sends me to a specialist, and I remember getting ready to have a procedure to see what's going on. And right before I go under, he tells me, well, at your age, it's less than 1% chance that it could be cancer.
Yeah, you were in your mid-30s.
Yeah, I was 35 at the time. And then, remember waking up and hearing the doctor say cancer, and I just kept falling back to sleep and hearing it over and over again. And then eventually, not long after, I go to my oncologist to get the official news, and he comes in and he breaks it down about how bad it is, that this is stage 4 colon cancer. And it was just devastated, and I'm starting to fall apart in the consulting office, and my wife is with me. And as he's sharing that, he tries to use some small talk to keep me engaged.
Yeah, you were clearly upset.
Yeah, I was very, very shaken. And so, he asked, what is it you do for a living? I was like, well, I'm a psychologist and I'm a professor, and I also direct the Humanitarian Disaster Institute at Wheaton College. And he's like, well, you're in for your own personal disaster.
It seems a bit harsh. I know when I was reading your book, which is called A Walking Disaster, What Surviving Katrina and Cancer Taught Me About Faith and Resilience by Jamie ATEN. We're going to continue the conversation in a moment. Again, I think, you get prepared for your disaster. Well, we'll talk about how you got through it and where you're at today when we come back. Jamie ATEN is my guest, and before we went to the break, you have now been diagnosed with cancer stage 4. What I found interesting reading your book, which is a great book, by the way, important book, I think, as well, A Walking Disaster, is you then talk to your parents and you tell them at least they caught it early.
Yeah.
That wasn't true. What was kind of going on, Jamie?
You know, I think the way that I'm wired, I'm a natural optimist, and I think that's one of the reasons that I'm able to do the work that I do and see the things that I see. And I remember always trying to look for the bright side in things. And when I was breaking the news to my parents without even realizing it, you know, those words of "at least we caught it early" came out of my mouth, and I had to stop myself and be like, actually, you know, Mom, Dad, we didn't catch it early. It's actually really advanced. And that was really hard for me. I didn't want to own how bad it actually was.
And it was bad, Jamie. I mean, you were in a lot of pain. You're trying to raise 3 daughters. You have a wife. And you had a great career, and you were shut down.
Yeah, it was really hard. You know, my whole life I'd kind of always been the helper, and then especially in my professional role, that I was always the person that went into the disaster zone. Now I'm the helpee, and that was a big shift for me.
So as you were going through this, and you know, you have a relationship with Jesus, and it's kind of the why questions, were you asking that? And I mean, even, again, very vulnerable in here, like, is there even a God? Because I'm going through this.
Yeah, the why questions were really hard, especially early on. I can remember wanting to know, like, why is it I have cancer? You know, why is it hitting me while I'm so young? You know, I've been trying to serve you, God. Why would this happen to me? And I kept just feeling perplexed with these questions, and then ultimately realized that I was never going to have an actual answer to my question, but realized that God's always there with us, and that that's the most important thing that we can have.
And because of your work, I mean, you're going into these disaster zones, you know, like in Haiti, where there's so much damage and destruction, and all over the world where you've traveled. Was that informing you a little bit? Because, I mean, you were encountering people that were asking the very same why question.
Yeah, it definitely did. You know, that was one of the things where I kind of had some of these moments, kind of like The Great Gatsby, where you almost feel like the narrator, where there was a few times going through my cancer experience where, as I was going through something, I would reflect on, well, what has our research found? And oftentimes actually it helped me understand the research better. You know, just like one of those examples would be spiritual surrender.
So how long was the process then from the time you were diagnosed and now you're in remission, and you believe there has been a miracle? You mean your body, again, you described, got pretty beat up and all this, but where are you at right now?
So, you know, the overall treatment took right around a year. So went through really a huge battle there.
Yeah, the chemo and the radiation.
Chemo and radiation and surgeries. And then now it's grateful to be able to share that's 4.5 years of no evidence of disease.
So what have you learned about it? You do take some time in the book to talk about the importance of resilience and also, I guess, coming to grips with what you're going through.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me as I reflect on this experience is really remembering that God is with us no matter the suffering, and that no matter how deep the scars or pain, that God can redeem our suffering.
How was this on your family, your
it was
daughters?
very challenging.
Because they were at various ages.
Yeah, it was very challenging on all of us, and so we tried to be as open with them, and that was a battle constantly for me, where I always wanted to try to paint the picture better than it was, but also realizing that we have to be able to talk about the reality of how challenging things were.
Before we came out to the interview, we were kind of talking, and we're kind of guys that like to fix situations, but you were down, and it was difficult for you. How were you able to overcome some of that desire to try to, you know, fix yourself and be the husband and dad that you wanted to be?
You know, I think a couple of things. One was I really had to learn what it meant to walk in humility. That I remember there was this one time where early on in the treatments, my wife was wanting to set up a schedule so that I could get rides to chemotherapy. And I remember saying, oh, I don't need rides, I'm going to be fine. And as soon as I was arguing about this, I actually walked right into the wall because I'd lost my balance. So the whole experience was really humbling.
Have you learned some things, Jamie, through this?
Yeah, you know, I think one of the most important lessons is to really be able to not only trust God, but to trust the community that He's put around us, to accept the help when we're in need of help.
And forgiveness, I know, is a big part. And as we close this interview, one of your daughters sees you, you have your shirt on, you're looking in the mirror in the bathroom. Tell me about that conversation, because it brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah, well, you know, it was the first time that my daughter had seen some of my scars, and I was getting ready for work one day, and I was getting ready to put my shirt on, and I look up in the mirror, and all of a sudden, I see my youngest daughter just looking and taking in the railroad tracks of scars that I have. And in a silent voice, and you know, very quietly, she asked, "Dad, are you still going to have this pain and still be hurting when you get to heaven?" And I didn't know what to say. And I turned to her and I said, no, sweetie, God's going to give Dad a whole new body. I'm not going to have any more pain anymore. And then she kind of pauses, still emotional.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she pauses and she gives a big yes, and like she had won the WNBA championship, and then she like hops off. And that was just so important to me to realize that God really can redeem our suffering.
Well, Jamie, thank you for sharing your story. And again, I would recommend this book, A Walking Disaster, how Jamie, got through cancer and also through Hurricane Katrina, and using his wisdom. And again, it's well written. You tell your story. It's very raw. And again, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jamie, for coming.
Thank you so much.
And there's so many lessons that we didn't even have time to get into, but that's why you got to get the book. And if you're going through cancer, or you've been given a diagnosis, or going through something really horrific right now, please know that we always have people standing by, because Jamie and I believe in prayer. So it gets us through. We don't always know why these things happen, but we do know that God is with us. 1-866-273-4444, and we'll be right back.